like you said, there's so much historical content. And I think that, leads me right into my next question that I want to touch on is the fact that obviously we face troubling times with this ongoing pandemic, but we've also faced troubling times with Black and Brown Americans in this country. We've seen problems from the beginning of this pandemic when we saw protests and riots happening. I think the racism that still exists in our country and also the police brutality that exists was something that was clearly evident more than ever. And I think that was a big problem that we went through in 2020 and something that we are still fighting till this day. Obviously, it's something that's gone on for the last 400 years, but it's something that's been evident, especially during this time where we were all locked in the house and we all had the opportunity to see it. And the reason why I bring this up is because I just want to say thank you for being an ally, for somebody who speaks up on this. I know me being African-American myself, it's like we get to the point where, we don't necessarily feel like the need to have to always speak up all the time or always have to educate somebody. So to see a friend of mine and also a friend of mine who is Caucasian descent, it meant a lot to me to see you speak up on my behalf and Black and Brown Americans as a whole. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I wanted to ask you, what was it that made this important to you, and why is it that this is still important to you till this day?
Sure. Excellent question. First, don't have to thank me. It's, something that is super important to me. Obviously 2020 was a blaring notice for everyone. But this is, like you said, been going on for 400 years, going back to 2014 in Ferguson, things like that, which was my first kind of realization. I was 18, 19 years old and, old enough to understand what's going on and old enough to read into it and understand the magnitude of the situation. But being 18 or 19 years old, you're worried about what other people think about you, or you're not, I don't care about politics or whatever it may be. So I don't think that I personally, unfortunately, was not confident enough to speak on the things that I knew were wrong, things that I took the time to research and read about. I wasn't there yet, which is unfortunate. But I think that what 2020, the biggest thing it gave me was the confidence to speak about the things that are important to me, not care what, people think about it. And just knowing that, when I'd sit there in anger and frustration and sadness, seeing what was happening to Black and Brown communities and wondering like, why isn't anyone talking about this? Why isn't anyone doing anything about this? And then I realized I am anyone. Like the reason no one's doing anything or saying anything is because they're thinking the same way I am. So why not start doing something? And I mean, posting on social media is like the tip of the iceberg of doing something. But I think having people who listen to you is huge, and having the people who have reached out to me saying, thank you for sharing this. I never would have known this. That's been, super encouraging to me to continue. And, obviously this is a factor. My littlest sister is a Black American. And, seeing what happened to Breonna Taylor, especially, fueled my fire even more because I want her to be able to grow up and have a full life and not have to face these hardships that I've never even had to think about facing or dealing with. And, whether she existed in my life or not, I believe I would still be on this track. But of course, she's an added influence. And then also just being in healthcare where, racist policies are everywhere. They're in our policing, they're in our housing guidelines, they're in, loans, everything that serves us as people has some sort of discriminatory aspect to it. And one of those things, unfortunately, is healthcare. And, it's one thing in my life that I can contribute to full-heartedly and, have the knowledge to contribute to. And so, understanding the discrepancies between white Americans and people of color in healthcare, whether that's access to healthcare or once they get the healthcare, it's, you know, how they're treated in the healthcare, and, you know, starting anywhere from the rates of, you know, infant death after birth or maternal death during birth. You know, Black women are at a greater risk than anyone else to die in American healthcare, which is terrifying. You know, and then just seeing it with my own eyes, you know, sickle cell anemia is a illness that primarily affects Black people, Africans in general, and just seeing, you know, the differences in how healthcare professionals treat pain amongst white and Black individuals. You know, there was a study run stating that 60% of med students believed Black people felt less pain than white people, which is insane to me.
Wow. Yeah.
Obviously not. So I just think that what's kept me going is knowing that I have a role to play here. I don't know everything, and I don't know how to even fix these things, but I think that having the knowledge of these discrepancies and these inequities, it's hard to sit there and do nothing and to be quiet and to not want to make a difference once you fully understand what's going on here. And I think that's what's kept me going. And, you know, while 2020 was a horrible, horrible year, I'm thankful that it lit the fire under so many people's butts to, you know, learn and be active. And, you know, a lot of people who maybe never once thought about it are now, you know, finally thinking through what's at hand here.
Well, you touched on so many great.
Yeah, sorry, that was a lot.
No, that was perfect. You touched on so many great points, and I want to address a few of them. You obviously said maybe at 18 or 19 years old, you didn't necessarily grow out of your shell enough to where you felt comfortable speaking out. I just want to address that and say that everybody, I mean, growth as a whole is something that we all go through. We all hit it at different times in our life. So I just want to say that it's okay for people to maybe be afraid to speak out because they still care about what friends think, and whatever the reasoning may be. I think that's okay, as long as you get to a point in your life where you do see that growth, where you are breaking out of your shell, becoming more mature, and feel like, okay, I understand what's going on here, and now's the time where I need to address it and speak out in instances where it's necessary, and not be afraid of something that may come along with that. So I think that was huge. And I also want to address the fact that you said, you have a Black sister, and so that's an added influence for you in this whole situation. And I think everything you've done so far has set a great example for her, and I'm sure that she, I don't know how old she is, but even if she doesn't see everything that you're doing right now, I promise you that she probably notices it, and that she's appreciative, and a big sister like you. And then thirdly, like I said, you touched on a lot of great points, so I'm trying to remember in my head, but thirdly,
no worries. There's a lot.
Thirdly, you said it's just the tip of the iceberg to post something on social media, but you've been consistent. And that's not me going on here and saying, hey, Genevieve, I expect something on social media every day, because I don't. What I'm saying is that I've noticed what you've done, and I know where your heart is. That's the main thing. But you said that's the tip of the iceberg, but you even took it a step further by actually joining peaceful protests earlier last year, sorry.
It's confusing.
Yeah, they all run together. But I actually saw that. I saw you and your boyfriend actually have the opportunity in Chicago downtown, have the opportunity to join peaceful protests. And I thought that was really interesting. And, it made me smile. And I think I reached out to you during that time, and we talked about it. Can you talk about that experience? Because you also, if I remember correctly, there were some things that went down as far as, I don't know if it was full on violence, but people attacking you. Can you talk about that experience?
Yes. So the protests that we took part of were absolutely amazing, humbling, a wonderful experience. We would usually march a certain amount of distance and then reach a designated spot where everyone would, take a knee or sit or stand off into the distance and let Black voices speak about the injustices that they faced or the generational trauma they've felt, And it was a great opportunity to hear from people that maybe I would have never met in my entire life. But now I get to hear their perspective and their journey and their struggles. And it was just extra fuel to keep going. I think we marched 40 to 50 miles this summer.
Wow.
Throughout Chicago. So that was really cool, seeing parts of Chicago that maybe never would have seen. And just the magnitude of how many people were there, all fighting for the same cause. But like you said, yes, there was a lot of violence. And it's hard because, you know, this is such a touchy topic for so many people, but, you know, majority of what I saw was peaceful. There was no instigation of violence from protesters. Take that how you wish. What I personally witnessed was police officers pulling out their batons on us just standing there, which I thought was ridiculous. You know, we're exercising a right we have in this country to voice our opinions on something that is clearly incredibly wrong. And so to be met with violence, especially for just standing there with a sign, felt really discouraging. And then, you know, we also had some like interesting encounters with some counter protesters in terms of like white supremacist groups. A man, you know, pulled out his little shank and was chasing me with it and threw whiskey in Sean's eyes. It was it was very peculiar. And you know, and the reason why that confrontation happened was because he was a counter protester and he was breaking windows. And so a lot of us were frustrated with that because we were all being peaceful and we were like, please don't break those windows, you know, like that takes away from our image and what we're trying to convey. You know, if they see hours and hours of footage of us peaceful protesting, but they see that one clip of the windows being broken, guess what's going to stick in their mind? And guess what they're not going to listen to, what we have to say. Exactly. So we confronted him and were met with not very nice treatment. So those were my two biggest experiences. Obviously, seeing police officers using force on protesters that was unnecessary was hard to witness. Luckily, I personally did not get any injuries, and none of the people that I protested with did either. But we always carried backpacks with milk, first aid, water, all the things that you may need, whether it was for us or for someone else that we may have come across.
Well, it sounds like you're a true protester, and
oh gosh, never thought that would be the case.
And you know, I'm just happy that you and Sean were safe throughout that time, and at the same time, obviously standing up and supporting a good cause. And like you said, you went through that instance and received some backlash from some counter protesters, and I think you brought up a great point there because of the fact that with social media, everybody has the opportunity to decide what they want to show. You know what I mean? So for people that are at home, you may only be seeing one side of something. So you might not get the full story of what happened prior to that. So I think it's important that you were out there and you got to see everything and witness everything firsthand versus everybody who's commenting on something based off of what they see on social media. You have to remember that social media, we put things out there that we want people to see. If we don't want somebody to see something, we can easily edit and cut it out. So I think during that time of racism, I thought that's why we started to see a divide, amongst people and even amongst friends because of videos that were posted and one person had this opinion, another person had this opinion. But at the end of the day, we don't know if we were seeing the whole story, but the point is we're trying to explain that there's an ongoing problem that has been around for the last 400 years. And I think that's all we're trying to get across to people. And I appreciate you being one of the people that did that.
Yeah. And kind of bridging off that, I think a big cause for divide here is that When people are protesting against something that feels so American, like racist policy has been in American history since America has existed. So when someone sees me post about how we must change these rules, they think that I'm saying I hate America, when in fact, I love America. And that's why I'm confronting the issues it holds. When you love something, you don't let it be, defected. You fix it, you work on it, and, it goes with a relationship or anything like that. And so
people have trouble seeing that and understanding that, right?
Yeah. And I think, being vocal about these things is always going to welcome backlash from people, whether it's, verbally, or in my instance, there was a couple physical threats. But, I think the biggest thing that I took from this situation is not letting the people who have differencing of opinions than me, not letting that dim my light, and not letting that, discourage me from speaking on things that I know I need to speak on, that I know are right, the right thing to do. And, instead of focusing on the people who are giving me backlash, I'm choosing to focus on the people who are building me up and making me a better ally. I've formed a book club where we read, certain books that educate us on things that we missed in U.S. history, or books by Black authors that, just give a different perspective on things that I never would have realized. And so while the backlash has been difficult, because of course, human nature is caring about what people think about you. No matter how much confidence I've gained through the years, I mean, it is still human nature to feel upset when someone's like, I don't like you. I mean, that's not a good feeling. But I've chosen to use the positive people I've gained through this, and the positive, feedback I've received to keep me going.
So just to reiterate, there is backlash that comes with this. And I think that, like you said, you kind of grew out of your shell, and you got to a point where you knew deep inside that you were going to speak on topics that mattered and that were important to you, regardless of how friends or family perceive that. Because obviously I've had instances where I've talked to people, and not only do they receive backlash from friends, but they receive backlash from family members, because one family member is on the other side. But ultimately they're all family, so it's just kind of sad to kind of see that divide between them. But I think what I'm getting out of you, and the reason why I'm trying to just kind of reiterate it, is because I want to let people know that this is something that happens in the world. Like, if you speak up on something that can be a little touchy, or that can be a little uncomfortable, you will receive backlash. And I think 100%. One term that we use in basketball a lot is get comfortable being uncomfortable, which means you're putting yourself in situations that you're not normally accustomed to. Okay, sit down, figure out a way to get through it. And because of that, you'll be more knowledgeable at the end of the day. So people out there, whoever's listening to this video between Genevieve and I, you will receive backlash in anything that you speak up on in life, and you have to be willing to accept it. And just know that at the end of the day, the ones who truly understand you, or take the time to understand you, are the ones who, you would really want to keep around in life. Would you agree with that?
Could not have said that better myself. Okay. I think every influential person who's made any sort of difference in anything, and not comparing myself to them, because I mean, what I'm doing is the bare minimum. Not everyone likes them. You read about them in history, and a lot of people actually dislike them. And so I think that was a huge realization I had to make, was that not everyone's going to like what I have to say, and that's okay. Well, it's not, because I'm talking about racial justice, but but it's okay. I had to learn that it's okay for people not to like me. I grew up a people pleaser, so if you're anything like me, take that again.
Well, I want to give you another thank you, because of giving me the space to vent when I need, when need be. I know that obviously we grew up in the same area, so obviously you know how it is. We went to elementary school, middle school, and high school together. But throughout our time growing up, we've had the opportunity to be around a mixed culture of people, you know what I mean? Especially at high school where, you know, you got all types of culture. So to be around that, you know, it's just really important, you know what I mean? And so I growing up, I did have a lot of friends that were on the white side, as much as I had friends that were on the black side, as much as I had, you know, friends that were on the Hispanic side. But for the friends that I had on the white side, as you grow up and get older and you start to see what some of those white friends are starting to post and talk about, which was something that was way different back when, you know, politics wasn't really a thing in our lives. And we were all just friends. And it seemed like, you know, we liked each other, you know what I mean? But then we get to a point where you still feel like you like each other, but you see them speaking on things that go against people of color. So I say that all to say that, you know, it has kind of hurt me throughout this time. And at the end of the day, it's nothing that's going to keep me down, because I don't really let things keep me down easy. But I appreciate you giving me, because I know me and you like to vent to each other sometimes. So I think that's been perfect to kind of bounce ideas off of each other and blow off some steam. So
yeah, I think it's disheartening to learn you have a difference in morals. You know, difference in political opinions is one thing. I mean, differences on taxes, like I don't care. You know, but difference in morals that one hurts. So I totally get, I mean, I can't even imagine the emotional trauma that Black Americans have faced, not only in 2020, but prior years, but this year, especially for some of us who have gotten old enough to fully understand what is going on. But yes, I love having you as a resource to talk through things. And I like that you feel comfortable enough to reach out to me when you're feeling uncomfortable or upset by something, because I think a misconception here is that people are like, okay, well, Black people, what do you want us to do about it? Like, no, this isn't a Black person problem. This is a white person problem. And we have to do the work to make the change, because we're the one who created the problem. And so, you know, I love that you feel comfortable enough to come to me. I have a lot of work to do in this journey, but I hope that, you know, I can continue to do things that make you feel good.
Sure. Thank you. I truly appreciate it. And I know, obviously, bringing you on the show, that shows the amount of confidence and you know, belief that I have in you. I think I just want to give a quick shout out to Aaron Amory and Austin Amory, two other friends of mine, another couple that has, you know, been vocal during this time and has checked up on me during the times when all of this was going on. So to see that couple doing it and you and Sean's, you know, speaking up, you know, it's really been amazing. So I really appreciate it. And I'm glad we spent enough time talking about this. I do want to ask one more question on this topic, and then we'll move on to our last segment. But in everything that we've talked about, where do you want to see our country go from here?
Sure. You know, 2020 was a horrible year. But one thing that I don't want people to move on from, you know, let's hope 2021 is a better year, but I don't want things to seem better and then everyone forget about what we learned and what motivated us in 2020. I want us to take that, you know, motivation and the lessons we learned with us and continue to do the work, because the work's not over, you know, far from over. The biggest thing I think is, you know, I want more people like us, just the layman, you know, putting in the work to put pressure on our government officials to make changes to racist policies, because there's racist policies in every facet of our government. And, you know, I want us to be able to put the pressure on the people who are supposed to represent us so that there can be racial equity. I think the inequality we see is, you know, people love to blame it on shortcomings of certain groups of people, which is like an assimilationist idea. And rather thinking that way, we need to think anti-racist, and we need to think of, you know, certain results in communities are due to what is implemented, and what's implemented is these racist policies. So for us to see any sort of change, we got to put the pressure on the people who have the control over those policies. And so while I know that's not going to happen overnight or in 1 year, got to start somewhere. And what I hope is that, the general public realizes that and is willing to write to their senators, call their senators, or whatever it may be, so that we can make those changes to ensure we have racial equity.
I think that's great. And I think just in talking to you about everything that's been going on throughout our country, I think I see the fire in you, and I see the leadership in you, whether you feel like you have those traits or not. I can see it just through this short video, and obviously in knowing you. So I just want to tell you that I think, there's a lot down the road for you moving forward, whether it be, addressing topics like these, or whether it be in anything else that you want to do in life. I think your leadership will speak volumes. So I think obviously you do great work, in the healthcare industry, but I think whatever else you want to do on the side, I think you'll succeed tremendously.
Thank you. That means a lot, especially because it took a long time to get here.
No doubt. And that happens. So I definitely see that for you.
Thank you.
Now, Genevieve, we'll move on to our last segment, which I like to call On the Personal Side. I'll ask you 5 short questions in hopes that my audience and I can get to know you just a little bit better.
Sure.
Who's your mentor? And in a few words, how have they influenced you?
Less a mentor because I don't know them personally, and more like an idol or an inspiration would be Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She came from nothing, accomplished everything, overcame 1,000,001 obstacles, and then kind of became this quiet but mighty force that, when she saw something wrong or injustice, she spoke up and dissented. And I think that while she was all of like 5 foot and very soft-spoken, she, did the hard work despite the sacrifices she had to make to get there. And I think that's kind of influenced me, not only, with my activism, my interest in activism, but also in my journey of, overcoming the obstacles to become a nurse.
For sure. And may she rest in peace. She was a great one.
I know.
A book you recommend and why?
Okay, I actually have it next to me. This is not a light. This is not a light read. This is a very large book.
Wow.
Yes, but it definitely started my understanding of how deep-rooted injustices in America are. It's called Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. He's a Black author. He's wonderful. He talks about how, all the things that are left out in U.S. history because, our U.S. history was tailored to make us look the best. And so he kind of touches on those things that aren't necessarily the best. And then quickly, the book I'm currently reading is How to Be an Anti-Racist by the same author. So while I haven't finished it and can't give, the honest review, it's a good follow-up. Stamped, while it's enormous, it's worth it because you learn everything you need to know.
No, I think those are great options. And I think the great thing is that we all have a little bit more time than usual, especially people that have to work from home. So I think it doesn't matter how large the book is, as long as there's meaning behind it. So I think those are 2 great recommendations.
Totally. I mean, that book took me months. It took a big chunk of my quarantine time, just because it's a tough read. But it's worth it. It's worth to challenge your mind and to challenge what we always viewed as normal or what we thought was right. It's good for that.
I love it. Question number 3, if you were given the chance to go back in time, what would you do differently?
Start sooner. Have the confidence I have now to do what I want to do and speak about the things I want to speak. I think that many of us fall victim to not believing in ourselves or feeling insecure about certain things we care about because it's not the norm. So I think the one thing I would change, while, you know, my journey was not, like I said, linear, and, you know, in a perfect world, maybe that'd be something to be changed, but at the same time, it got me to where I am now. And so I wouldn't change the hardships. I would just change when I started.
Yeah. I think the last guest I had on, when I asked him this question, his response was, marry my wife sooner. And so it seems like there's this trend, you know, sooner, no matter what it is, people wish they would have started sooner. So I think obviously we all go through life at a different time and everybody's different. So I think our experience is our experience. Your experience is your experience. But for people who are listening to this and maybe younger, maybe when they hear it from us, maybe they'll start sooner rather than wait till later. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep. Fourth question, greatest decision that helped propel your career forward?
Let's see. Taking the leap of faith to apply to Northwestern's emergency department. I always had this mindset. Thank you. I always had this mindset that, you know, this prestigious hospital won't hire a new graduate nurse, or they won't hire a new graduate nurse into the emergency room, or blah, 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 blah. But that's where my heart lies, is in emergency medicine. And I fell in love with it in nursing school and knew that's where I wanted to be. And, you know, I had a lot of people say, oh, you got to start on a general medical floor, learn the basics, and then, you know, transfer over. And I decided to go against the grain and not do that. And I'm so thankful I did, because, you know, instead of forming myself as a nurse in one floor and then going to the emergency room and having to rewrite what I think I know, I'm kind of sculpting myself to be, you know, the ultimate ER nurse by starting where I wanted to be. So I think just the courage to be uncomfortable and start somewhere that's going to challenge me. And it has, and it's been rewarding.
Yep. So take that leap of faith and don't be scared. Exactly. All right. Last question for you. What thoughts can you leave us with to overcome the challenges that we faced during 2020 as we take on 2021?
Absolutely. Like I said before, you know, take the time to heal the wounds that 2020 has given us, but don't forget what it taught us. I think the knowledge that we've gained in this horrendous year is going to propel us through the next coming years. And I think, you know, just remembering what's important, and being as, you know, taking the time to rest when you need it, and taking the time to be sad when you need to be, but then remembering what we have and how grateful we are for what we have.
Exactly. I think that's great. And I couldn't have said it better. So that's great advice to leave us with. And I hope people take it as they may and utilize it within their own lives.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for having me. This was a wonderful experience.
No problem, Genevieve. I appreciate you coming on to the JB and Co show, and I appreciate you sharing your experiences. And I just want to let you know that as we highlighted, you know, your career and everything that you're doing right now during this tough time, that we appreciate you as a healthcare worker, and we appreciate all healthcare workers throughout our country who are doing their due diligence and working hard to put a stop to this ongoing pandemic. So we truly appreciate you. Don't think that for 1 second that we're not supporting you. So keep doing what you're doing. And again, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And to my audience, thanks for tuning into this episode of JB & Co. And we'll catch you next week. Thanks.